The First World War produced its quota of heroes, many of whom have now been forgotten, but one name still remains in the collective memory as someone who left his mark on the period. Manfred von Richthofen, better known by the name of the Red Baron. This Uhlan cavalryman from an aristocratic Prussian family was destined to become the German pilot with the most number of victories to his name during the Great War. In 1916, at the height of the Battle of the Somme, aviation became a determining factor in the ground offensives. At that time, Manfred von Richthofen was a young 23-year-old pilot serving in German aviation's elite Jasta II squadron.
Congratulations on the fight. Glad to see you alive. Lieutenant?
Todd. Alan Todd.
Lieutenant Manfred von Richthofen. Happy to meet you. You're my 16th victory. Well, I hope to see you soon. Lieutenant von Richthofen, don't forget. Good luck to you.
The Red Baron's personality can be attributed to his noble origins. He came from an old Prussian family of officers. His father was a cavalry officer, and his ancestors were field marshals. He grew up in a family which was very attached to the values of the nobility and the army, which often went hand in hand for that generation. For example, a taste for hunting, which the Red Baron was particularly fond of.
At the age of 11, he joined the cadets in Wallstatt because his father was determined that he should become a soldier. His father wanted to take revenge on destiny, as he himself had had to give up the army because of a wound. So he pushed Manfred von Richthofen to take his place. He had what you might call the characteristics of a soldier, somewhat cold, rigid, and at the same time with a sense of adventure. He hoped the army would allow him to have a successful life and please his father.
He was in an enviable position. He knew it, and he made the most of it. He knew it might be the death of him, but he thought it was worth it. He knew that in a way he'd already made his mark.
He had this very aristocratic way of fighting, in which you wouldn't dream of firing on an aviator who was beaten or on the ground. Sometimes he even landed alongside English pilots who he had beaten. He'd offer them a cigarette, he'd engage in conversation, even lead them behind his own lines to take them prisoner. So he had a respect for the enemy. So, you risked your life to congratulate the enemy. What's your problem, von Richthofen?
When I respect a pilot, I tell him so.
Here, read this. High Command has decided to transfer you to the Jasta 11. As of next Monday, you will be at the head of the squadron. Men's lives will be in your hands. I trust that it will make you more responsible.
Of course, Captain.
War is not a game, von Richthofen. It is serious, very serious. That'll do. Dismissed.
Dear Mother, I have just learned that High Command is placing me at the head of the Jasta 11. I should be delighted at this promotion, and yet it's quite the contrary. After my 16th victory, I was expecting to receive a Pour le Mérite Cross, but perhaps they've decided it's never to be. Didn't Volky receive one after just 9 victories? And I'll be leaving all my friends. We're a real team. It's a shame. Who will I know there? But I can't feel sorry for myself. I dreamt of flying, and here I am the happiest of men. Every day is different. No two battles are alike. It's very exciting. The sky is a battlefield like no other, where solidarity and a sense of honor reign like nowhere else. I remember starting out with the Uhlan. I was so proud to be in such a prestigious cavalry unit, but our missions didn't turn out as I would have liked. Today, the future is aviation, not horses. When I'm in the air and pass over the trenches, I always think of the comrades that I knew down there. And the hellish mud where every day is the same. Where the enemy never shows itself. Where the waiting is endless. I must look to the future now and write my story. Your loving son, Manfred.
He was delighted to go to war. He literally said there was nothing more beautiful for a horseman than to go hunting. It tells you a lot about his character.
Indeed, aviation was a chance for success. And he was a media man. He liked to be the first. He was competitive. And in aviation, he was quickly to become the hero, which was extremely important for him.
He looked upon war as a sport. It's crazy, but it's true. Only success mattered. He wanted to be known, famous. Being a hero was what he wanted, so that people would glorify him.
We're very happy to welcome you here, Lieutenant. This is your office. Meals are at 12:30 every day, apart from mission days, of course, when the program varies depending upon pilot arrivals.
Wait a moment. Do you not mark victories on the combat board?
Well, the combat board...
Are you telling me that in 3 months the squadron hasn't shot down a single aircraft? Why has this mark been rubbed out?
The aircraft fell in enemy territory, Lieutenant. The victory couldn't be confirmed.
Who is this Udet?
He's the youngest pilot in the squadron. He's 21.
Dismissed.
Lieutenant,
When he arrived at the Yasta 11, he had to start from scratch. He had to rebuild a famous squadron, a prestigious squadron, but he needed to enlist pilots. What did the Red Baron do? He began touring military bases, aeronautic bases, naval schools. He went to Berlin and tried to spot pilots who were suitable to fly under his orders. That's how he came to take on a fair number of great pilots who would become more or less the best German aviators of the second half of the First World War.
Be aware, gentlemen, that I didn't choose to come here. I was in the Reich's best unit, the Yasta 2. But High Command transferred me here, a bunch of beginners who don't even have one victory on their combat board. You better look lively, gentlemen. Show me your talent, or I'll find talent elsewhere. There's no lack of volunteers to pilot this sort of machine. Now that things are clear, gentlemen, maybe over there. Udet.
Yes, Lieutenant.
So you're Udet.
Udet was someone who would give anything to fly. He'd been a motorcyclist. The other pilots hadn't taken to him, but he'd paid for his own training, and they ended up accepting him.
Udet didn't know the Baron at the beginning, although he'd obviously heard about him. He dreamed of being able to emulate the Red Baron's talent because the exploits of the Red Squadron monopolized the front pages. At the time, Udet was unknown, so he dreamed of getting journalists' attention, of attracting the press. The Red Baron saw Udet as a promising student, definitely a capable young man, both a good and very courageous pilot, so he gave him support. He could see he had a bright future.
Let's see what this Yasta's made of. Ball's in your court, Udet.
My dear compatriots,
The year 1917 has begun, and our country has been at war for over 2 years. A war which we thought would be short, but which has more and more taken root. A difficult war for my compatriots, who all wish this butchery to end. After 10 months of combat in the hellish trenches, the Battle of Verdun is at last over. But at what cost? More than 330,000 Germans died on the battlefield. Who does not have a brother, a cousin, a friend, wounded or dead in combat during this terrible encounter? But this war is changing. Trench warfare will never be the same again. Aviation has redealt the cards. It brings light, of course, but above all, it wages battle in the air. It bombs strategic objectives. It supports our men on the ground. It is a decisive element in the final victory, and we are lucky enough to have the best aviation in the world. Why? Not only because we have the best aircraft, but mainly because we have the best pilots, the most skillful, the most determined, the most courageous. They're the pride of us all. And it is thanks to them that we will win this war. We are here today to confer the highest military distinction upon one of the most talented of these pilots, Lieutenant Manfred von Richthofen, who has already totaled 16 authenticated victories. Lieutenant von Richthofen, it is my honor to award you the Pour le Mérite Medal.
Decorations were the big thing at the time. You can't imagine how many of them the pilots received. They started receiving them from the moment they had shot down 1 or 2 aircraft. Their chests must have been weighed down with medals. They were trophies, like an Oscar at the cinema, the Football World Cup, or an Olympic medal today. It wasn't the money, but the prestige which counted. Having one's place on the podium, being the best.
He was carried along by the prestige of wings. You have to understand that he wrote and published his memoirs in 1917. That is to say, during combat, at the height of the war, between 2 missions, and did a promotional tour, as you would say today. He took book signings in Berlin, in all the German cities, and afterwards he went back into battle. It was pretty surrealistic. He had this celebrity side to him, which perhaps blinded him to the reality of combat and brought about his downfall. You want the same color all over?
Yep, except the German cross. Leave that visible on the sides.
And the propeller?
Not the best camouflage, but it certainly has style.
Ah, Lothar, so good to see you. But I wasn't expecting you so soon. So, what do you think?
Suits you to a T. But you can count on the French and English to come up with a good nickname for you.
So he decided to paint his aircraft bright red. Firstly, because he wanted to serve as bait and draw the attention of the Allies towards himself, but also, of course, because his narcissistic side, very media conscious. The expression didn't exist at the time, but it's clear that the Red Baron had a media conscious vision of the 1418 war. It was also a way of distinguishing oneself in the same way as Indians had worn war paint. It was a way of doing war slightly in the old style.
He was extremely attractive bait and quickly recognizable to the enemy. They would say, wow, quite a feather in my cap if I take down the Red Baron. He flew rather low so as to be easily seen, while in reality his colleagues were flying unseen higher up at around cloud level. And if 1 or 2 enemy aircraft spotted him and went into attack, the others would immediately dive in. He took enormous risks.
While he was captain of the Staffel, the English put a price on his head. His comrades said to themselves, "We can't keep putting the boss's life at risk. We'll all paint our aircraft red." In fact, they weren't totally red. Each had a distinctive color on the tail. But from a distance, they looked red. That way, the enemy could no longer distinguish between the Baron from the other pilots. Von Richthofen was badly wounded by a glancing blow to the back of the head. His skull was damaged, as though it had received a hammer blow. He was temporarily blinded, and his arms were paralyzed. Afterwards, he couldn't fly for a long time, and could have been forgiven for thinking he'd never fly again. He struggled to get back to flying later on.
He had changed because the head wound left him suffering with headaches and nausea. At 24 or 25, you're immortal. You know that you're risking something, but you don't believe it. You don't feel it. But now he said to himself, "I almost died." That completely changed you. And from then on, he wanted to see it through to the bitter end. They would have liked to stop him, but he wanted to continue. He wanted to be the greatest. He wanted to prove them wrong. He wanted to prove he was immortal.
Dear Mother, for nearly 18 days I've been held in this hospital, far from the front and my comrades. I can't stand the waiting, but the doctors are holding me because of my migraines. I'm at the head of number 1 squadron now, made up of 4 Yastas. There are more than 30 of us in the air. You should see us. But recently we've lost some highly valuable men, and many more have been wounded. The situation can't last. With this arrogant Udet always looking to undermine my authority while clocking up victories. The war drags on, and I have the impression our enemies are making progress. English aviation has caught up with many of the technological innovations which we alone had up until now. Their new Sopwith Camel is exceptional in battle. The French now have their own aces in the sky, Guilmer and Fonck, who are downing many of our pilots. It's chaos in the trenches. The men are weary of this senseless butchery. Mutiny is more and more frequent, as it is with the enemy. The soldiers refuse to die stupidly and rebel. I also know that the United States have joined the conflict and have already arrived in France by the west coast. It is perhaps a turning point of the war. We need to hold firm or Germany is lost. I hope to be able to come and see you with Lothar as soon as I leave the hospital. It's been so long since we saw each other. Don't worry. My morale is high, and I will again fight for my country. Your devoted son, Manfred. Udet is clocking up victories. I have no choice. I must give it my all.
Udet and Richthofen had extremely different personalities. It's fascinating. One was an aristocrat, of course, the Red Baron. The other, a commoner, Ernst Udet. One began war on horseback, the other on a motorbike, so the difference in social standing was clear. Udet drank and liked women. The Red Baron was stay-at-home, drank a little wine now and then, but not very much, and women didn't interest him. So there was a real difference in lifestyle between Udet, who was really passionate about aviation and aircraft, who liked to fly, and Manfred von Richthofen, who liked the game, the hunt, wasn't much drawn by things of everyday life, and he concentrated on war.
The relationship between pilots of the Great War alternated between cooperation and competition. On the one side, they had to cooperate. Each depended on the others within a squadron, for better or for worse. And more generally as well, within this elite of fighter pilots, they always depended upon cooperation. At the same time, there was very marked competition over who was the best pilot, who could bring down the most aircraft, who would receive the social and military honors, and of course, public interest. A fighter pilot felt more or less obliged to accept this competition and aspire to success. The competition was very real and could be compared to a boxing match in which only victory by knockout counts. Like in the gladiators' arena, it was life or death. That was their conception of war.
The greater your desire to win, the more risks you take. The more sure of yourself you are, the further you push, until the day you go too far.
Half the guys you see here are dead now.
That's war, Manfred. That's how it is.
The question isn't who dies, but who remains in history. That's the important thing. Looks like I got a visitor. Well, well, Lieutenant Todd, fancy seeing you here. Leave him to me, damn you. Move aside or I'll take you down. Ah! Escape me, Todd.
Manfred von Richthofen was hit by a bullet while chasing an English aircraft. He managed to land his plane in enemy territory and died from his wounds. He was 25 years of age. For a long time, it was believed that the Baron was shot down by an English aircraft. But ballistic evidence showed that it was an Australian machine gun handled by an ordinary soldier by the name of Snowy. So it was he, from the ground, who brought a close to the saga of the greatest German aviator. The English and the Australians organized something unique in the history of the Great War: a full military funeral for a German pilot. On April the 22nd at Bertongle Cemetery north of Amiens in Picardy, the men of No. 3 Squadron of the AFC buried the Red Baron with the honors usually reserved for Allied pilots. Faces were solemn, emotion was high. A salute was fired, and a memorial wreath was laid with the inscription, "To our gallant and worthy foe. The like had never been seen." The Red Baron remains in all German memories as a symbol of heroism and courage never soiled by history. His 80 confirmed victories exceed those of any other pilot during the Great War.